Good morning. I'm Ed Scott, and on behalf of First Unitarian Church of Wilmington, Delaware, I welcome you to our morning service of this welcoming community. As I was preparing for this morning, I came across a discovery of an interesting happening, which some of you may be familiar with. Friday, April 28th, was Superheroes Day. Now, that may conjure up images of Marvel comic book heroes, but that has evolved to become a holiday which recognizes those who extend acts of kindness to lighten the burdens of others. And everyone here is among superheroes. Superheroes of independent living for young adults, of the Human Rights Task Force, our volunteers for Emmanuel Dining Room, the Environmental Justice Task Team, our staff, and so many more. Being welcoming is powerful. And by making this a welcoming congregation, each and every one of you is a hero to someone seated near you. And I encourage you to greet each other this morning and welcome one another to this community. And now, let us prepare our whole selves as we lean into this morning's page of our journey.
So before Ed and I do the call to worship this morning, I want to have us take a time for remembering 3 who have been part of our community who have passed away this week. So I will name them, light a candle in their honor, and we'll have a time to pause together. I realize some of you know these people and others of you don't, but let's hold them in the light of this community and remember the light that they once shared among us. So I light this first candle for us to remember the light that was Nan Norling. And I light this second candle for us to remember the light that was Wayne Pearson. And this third candle to remember Aaron Hamburger. As we pause now in silence, let's hold their blessed memory and the light that they shared through their lives in deep respect and gratitude. So let's pause now for a time of silence. May their memory be a blessing. So our call to worship is from E.E. Cummings, entitled, I Thank You. I thank you, God, for this amazing day, for the leaping, greenly spirits of trees and a blue, true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes.
I, who have died, am alive again today. And this is the Son's birthday. This is the birthday of life, of love, and wings, and of the gay, great happening, illimitably earth.
How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing any, lifted from the know of nothing, human merely being doubt, unimaginable, you.
Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened.
May our time of worship awaken us, open us, and allow us to find once more why, whatever our circumstances, why we are truly grateful, so that as we conclude our worship, when we conclude our worship today, we may each also say, and maybe these words appear on the screen, now the ears of my ears awake. Now the eyes of my eyes are opened.
As we light the chalice, hear these words of Reverend Dr. David Breeden, into the circle. We gather into this circle of care to dream, to envision, to embody and achieve the compassion of dream, the justice we envision, the dignity of each in an ever-growing circle of love and justice. And now please stand as you are able for the singing of hymn 1046, Shall We Gather at the River, and please remain standing after the hymn for our unison affirmation of our mission. Together, let us affirm our mission. First Unitarian Church of Wilmington
is a beloved community
that
that nourishes minds and spirits,
fights injustice, and transforms the world through loving action.
Let us begin our time of prayerful meditation by asking ourselves, how is it with my soul on this day? May we welcome whatever shows up when we ask that question. May we surround ourselves and one another with a love and a compassion that allows us to be open to the deep aspects of our own self and our own experience in such a way that we feel we are coming home to ourself in this moment. Whatever concerns we hold today are not only our concern alone. May we feel the presence of a strength beyond our own strength. May we feel the presence of a peace beyond our own peace. May we feel a healing beyond what we ourselves can provide. May we know a love that embraces us and holds us in this moment. Indeed, may we see the light of a clear blue morning. May we see the light of a brand new day. May we see the light of a clear blue morning. May we know somewhere within ourselves and among ourselves that everything's going to be all right. Everything's going to be okay. So may it be. Amen. As we embrace now this shared silence, let's recall whatever it is that we're holding in our hearts, a concern for ourselves or another, and then we'll have an opportunity to hear any of those concerns aloud that you wish to share following this shared silence. Maybe there are whispers in your heart that are beckoning you to pay attention. Maybe there's something in your life or in the life of the world that we share that's saying to you, pay attention. Maybe there's a particular concern that you hold for yourself or for another. And so each week we do give ourselves an opportunity to speak aloud, if you choose to do so, in this room, the name or the concern that you have, so that others can hear it, hold it alongside of you. Or if you're joining us online, you may write it in the chat. So what are the concerns that you are holding today that you would like to share in this community?
Barry Norling and his family,
Yes.
mass shootings, Sherman Harrison, Lee Marys,
May all whose names were spoken and those unspoken. Find peace and healing this day. There was quite a stir caused a few weeks ago. It wouldn't surprise me if you didn't experience it. But it happened when it was discovered that an influential, popular Lutheran pastor, a founder of a unique Lutheran congregation in Denver called A House for All Sinners and Saints in Denver, who is also a New York Times bestseller author, Reverend Nadia Bowes-Weber, spoke at the 150th anniversary of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of San Diego. Her remarks were subsequently posted on Facebook, so many people saw those remarks. Reverend Nadia disclosed in her speech the impact that Unitarian Universalism had had on her own religious journey in her young adulthood and on her life going forward. The universal response was, "Who knew?" She described her first unexpected encounter with a Unitarian Universalist in this way. It was early spring in 1990. I was not yet 20 years old and attending a house party in Boulder, Colorado. I guess I should mention it was a theme party, and now I just want you to imagine what it is that she says here. Imagine it happening right before your very eyes. She says, "My head that night was crowned in rollers the size of soda cans. My eyes were intentionally smeared with cheap eyeliner. I wore just a 1960s era slip and a push-up bra, and a cigarette dangled precariously from my bright red lips. It was a come out, whatever you are party. And I was dressed as a sexually depraved, middle-aged housewife." I took a seat next to a smiling fellow in a Mickey Mouse sweatshirt who was stationed on the sofa all night long due to a cast on his leg. I pointed at his immobilized leg and I said, "Yikes. You should have seen the other guy," he said smilingly. And by other guy, I mean my Harley, which has now seen an early grave. His name was Eric Kamenetsky, a law student, and I would find out later, a Unitarian. So in a conversation a week later, she continues, Eric said to her, "I know this sounds weird, but I'm the co-director of a super weird junior high summer camp in Western Massachusetts, And something tells me you'd be perfect on the staff. Nadia continues, I had literally nothing going on in my life, so a couple months later, I drove to a state I'd never been to, a camp I'd never seen, to work with a group of people I'd never met. I didn't even really know the guy that I knew. I had no idea at the time that I would end up returning for 5 summers in a row. It was Row, a Unitarian Universalist camp and conference center. Any of you heard of it? Okay, yeah. And the 5 summers I spent there had a profound effect on my life and my work moving forward. I wasn't raised Unitarian, she says, by the way. I was raised in the Church of Christ, perhaps the exact opposite of the Unitarian. Not the United Church of Christ, mind you, the straight-up Church of Christ. In the church of my childhood, the one we went to 3 times a week, there was a lot of talk about what a good Christian woman looked like, what kind of temperament she had, how deferential and obedient she was, how sweet and accommodating. I even attended Christian charm school, imagine that, on Tuesday nights, which clearly worked because I'm charming as hell. I had to clean up the language a little bit. You know, these Lutheran pastors, what a mouth they have. So she continued, the point is, in the religious community of my childhood, the only one I knew much about prior to meeting a Unitarian, there was little room for difference of any kind. Instead, it was strident about who belonged and who didn't belong. It was strident about what exactly we must believe. Strident about how exactly we must behave. We were taught what was and what was not a sin, and who was and was not a sinner. We were continually told what it meant to be good. It was all very clear. Now, most of those who had followed Nadia Bolz-Weber's work or had heard her speak to mostly Christian audiences before then had no idea of this connection with Unitarian Universalism. Reverend Nadia Bolz-Weber went on to explain, here's the thing about my experience at Row Camp. It was the first time in my entire life that I was in a community where being me was not a problem. It was the first time I showed up somewhere and people were like, OMG, you're amazing. For the first time in my life, this loud, wild, funny, slightly disobedient girl found a place where people were just fine with her being her. I could not believe how much freedom was allowed in that place and how beautifully we all blossomed as a result. Many years later, she continues, after I got my degree in religion and my master's in divinity and was ordained a Lutheran pastor and started an imperfect church from scratch, one that I felt comfortable in, that other weirdos would feel comfortable in, one where what you believed was never the basis for belonging, one where freedom was embraced. I was talking to an old friend from back in those summer camp days and telling her about this house for all sinners and saints, which was the name of her congregation, and how it was so filled with nerds and queers and soccer moms and junkies, and how everyone belonged and how deeply creative and hilarious it all was. To which she immediately replied, OMG, Nadia, you mean you basically started a Lutheran church which is like Row Camp? She continues, I'd never put it together until that moment, but weirdly, I think she was right. Having experienced a community where all were welcome and freedom was celebrated and creativity was encouraged and hilarity was expected and stridency and rules were seen as overrated, I wanted others to experience the same. I wanted to tell you this story this morning. First, it's entertaining for sure, but also it communicates a kind of a redemption journey of sorts that a young woman went through from a stringent, oppressive form of Christianity that I know several of you can relate to as well, right? But most of all, I wanted to tell you this story because I'm so enthralled with the idea, not in a smug sort of way, that there's a Lutheran pastor and congregation out there who caught something in a Unitarian Universalist camp. She incorporated it into her style of ministry and to the story of her Lutheran congregation. Nadia Bolz-Weber has gone on to inspire many contemporary Christians to revisit their faith and to lighten up. My favorite line in the story is when she said, "I wanted others to experience the same." Her story reminds me of that phrase that faith is caught, not taught. She found a decidedly Lutheran congregation, no doubt about it, but she grafted onto it some of her experience of what it was like to have been redeemed, I'll use that word, by Unitarian Universalism in her young adulthood. That UU summer camp was a greenhouse, I think, where she, as she said, could beautifully blossom in it. More than anything, I believe that what we at First Unitarian can be about is creating experiences for you, for you, for you, for anyone who comes into our midst, where they might know experientially what we're about. Where they might sense a freedom that redeems, a creativity that stirs our spirits, an energy that compels us to shape and form our lives around ways of being in the world that impact not only our own lives, but bring more justice, more compassion, and love into this world. That's my hope for us, that we might know it experientially. Bolz-Weber said, "I had an experience of a community, and I wanted others to experience the same." Yeah, I want the same for us. When Nadia Bolz-Weber was raised in the Church of Christ, a tradition that I'm sure has wonderful gifts to offer, and is a tradition that certainly held that one had faith when one had certain fundamental beliefs. What she discovered in Unitarian Universalism for 5 summers was that, as she says it, I needed there to be a place that had a spiritual foundation, but wasn't tangled up in doctrinal imperatives. Did you notice how I said I'd drink to that? I needed there to be a place for me to be received and told that who I am is actually a good thing. Oh, and by the way, join us in some prayer and meditation. Among other things, Unitarian Universalism can become that spiritual foundation that helps others trust life, trust their humanity, trust God again, even. Faith is more a way of being in the world, as my colleague, Reverend Daniel Cantor, has said. More than an adherence to a belief system, faith is an orientation to life. It's looking out at the world from a particular perspective and using that perspective to consider the meaning of our existence. I do believe and hope that in our congregation people catch a faith and have the experience that focuses them on this life, focuses us on the place where reason and emotion intersect, allows for an openness where personal meaning can be discovered and not coerced, that creates the conditions for authentic spiritual life rather than piousness, and encourages us to live a life congruent with our highest values that not only impact ourselves, but impact others. But none of that will ever happen unless we each of us embody it. Does that make sense to you? Does it make sense to you? I'm forcing you to say something, aren't I? I hope it makes sense to you, because we are the ones who give shape and form to that kind of experience through how we are with one another. I believe that we and others catch our faith by what they experience in our midst, by what we do, not just by what we say, by what we practice and not just what we propose. It's easy for us to forget that much of what we proclaim here in these walls, in this sanctuary, much of our style of being a faith community, of doing faith the way we do faith, has come through hard-fought conviction that it has historical religious roots, that it has theological significance even in the world beyond these walls. We might not realize that our earliest ancestors actually started a revolution of sorts in congregational life that expanded faith to include a way of being together, a way of doing things together, and not just a way of believing. Unitarian Universalist theologian Rebecca Parker, who just turned 70 last week, by the way, happy birthday, Rebecca, writes that our religious ancestors held the conviction that churches should come into being as a covenant among persons, not through common assent to a doctrine or through sacraments administered by priests, hierarchically arrayed and apostolically, you know what I'm trying to say, descended through the apostolic succession. Instead, people should join themselves by a mutual agreement to walk together. To walk together reminds me of those lectures that I attended with my Unitarian history professor, Conrad Wright, at Harvard Divinity School, who impressed upon us the importance of that phrase, walk together, that appeared in many of the early covenants of congregational churches. It was a persistent phrase. He says the operative words were, we do bind ourselves to walk together. They are not we believe. It wasn't until later in the 18th century, when particular theological debates occurred, that certain beliefs started to weave themselves into these congregational covenants. It is the practices that a covenanted community commit to that actually knit us together. Rebecca Parker points out, our verbal promises are the frosting on the cake, not the cake itself. They may help us keep the covenant we are in, but they are not the covenant itself. By our acts, she writes, by our acts of worshiping in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, structuring our life together to give room for the experience, the voice, and the vote of each person, and joining together to resist injustice, our spirits have fallen into a communal faith with one another, have fallen into a covenant with one another. Now, we have the ingredients for the practices that we agree to aim our individual and collective lives toward, already outlined in the covenant, which we have come to call our principles. Each of our principles begins with the phrase, we covenant to affirm and to promote. In my view, affirming and promoting are commitments to practices, not a commitment to just saying or remembering words. The commitments that we've captured in our principles may seem like a random set of nice words. However, there's nothing random about what follows the words that we covenant to affirm and promote. Each of these principles, what I tend to call practices, is actually rooted in religious history. grounded in our Unitarian Universalist histories. And they have a track record. We have a track record of experiences of our aiming to create that of which we speak, so that we can speak about it in integrity, not just idealism. And furthermore, I believe that we have more than enough reasons now to continue to covenant and to affirm and promote these practices, what we've called principles, particularly in the world that we're living in right now, this moment. Our work is not yet done. Now, let me explain by illustrating through a few of those practices that we call principles in our covenant. When we say, for example, that we covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, this is dramatically different than the theology and the view of humanity that Nadia Bowles-Weber grew up in. It's a distinction. It sends out a theological note. It's not just an arrangement of words. Unitarian Cliff Reed writes, Unitarians share a positive view of human nature and human potential. While not being blind to human weaknesses and our capacities for evil, we do not see human beings are inherently depraved or corrupt. We have little time for doctrines of original sin and inherited guilt. Unitarians affirm that all human beings originate in the divine unity. All have something of God in them. All are alive with the same divine breath. When we make such a declaration, we are connecting with these religious traditions, suppressed at times, when the story of original sin rather than original blessing is told. When we make such a declaration, we are glimpsing the world and each other, if only momentarily, with a mystic eye that recognizes within each of us a divine worth. Let's just practice that now. Let's just look at each other with that mystic eye that recognizes in each other that divine worth. Savor it for a moment. Let it be more than just words. May it be a practice where we pause and we look at one another and look for that which is holy and respectful, that which is of dignity in each one of us. These words echo the cries of our religious ancestors who were expelled and sometimes executed because they dared to proclaim them. So these are not light words. These are not a random assortment of words that we've put together. They have a grounding in religious history. They have a foundation in our own Unitarian Universalist path. Each of these practices within Unitarian Universalist covenant have similar roots. They send out a theological signal, as I said, not just for ourselves to hear, but they're grounded in our stories and compel us in a clear, concise way to generate experiences that can be redemptive in our midst, that can be liberating in our world if we but dare to respond. And folks, in a time when there are enough voices around us in 2023 who seek to denounce the inherent worth of some others, to legislate against them because of their gender expression, their sexual orientation, their race, or other characteristics, we need to, in my opinion, hold fast to our covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Do you agree with me? Here's another example. We say in our covenant that we covenant to affirm and promote the acceptance of one another and the encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, this practice too has a distinctiveness that ties us to religious history, emerges out of our own Unitarian Universalist story. This understanding that we are to continually develop ourselves spiritually was implicit in our founding in this country. Reverend William Ellery Channing, who gave his decisive sermon on Unitarian Christianity on May 5th, 1819 in Baltimore. Therefore, we're going to be celebrating the anniversary this week of that Baltimore sermon. That sermon became a sensation in its time. I understood that it was quickly published, and, quote, no pamphlet save only Thomas Paine's Common Sense had ever before circulated so widely in this country. It caught fire. It spoke to a condition. It spoke to a moment in which that message could be heard and was hungering to be heard. I don't think that hunger has subsided. If I look around our world today, I see many more reasons for us to commit ourselves to this ongoing spiritual development, to this acceptance of one another. Not only did Channing declare the inherent worth and dignity of every person, he also declared that God, rather than being a God of punishment and wrath, desired our ongoing development. We might express it in a different way today, but those were radical words, making a distinctive note in his time from those who felt like it was preordained how far any one person could develop. But the idea that each of us could develop ourselves and that God desired that development was radical and revolutionary at the time. Channing wrote, "The great end in religious instruction is not to stamp our minds upon the young or anyone else, but to stir up their own. Not to make others see with our eyes, but to look inquiringly and steadily with their own. Not to give others a definite amount of knowledge, but to inspire a fervent love of truth. Not to form an outward regularity, but to touch inward springs. Not to impose religion upon others in the form of arbitrary rules, but to awaken the conscience, the moral discernment. In a word, Channing says, the great end is to awaken the soul, to excite and cherish spiritual life." I think we can still hold fast to that commitment, that aspect of our covenant. I know that we do in this congregation. When I think about the care that we put into our programs of religious exploration for children and youth, the programs that we're doing for our own members in the larger community, the live stream programs for adults, our Soul Matters groups, our book groups, and so many other opportunities, so much more. How could we retire from this commitment expressed in our covenant when in certain parts of this country in 2023, books are being banned from schools and libraries, where there's a definite amount of truth or knowledge that is allowed to be dispensed? How could we retire from this commitment when certain subjects regarding racism and sexuality are legislated not to be taught in some of our public schools? No, I think we need to stand fast by affirming and promoting this particular practice. Do you agree? You can stand up and clap in agreement at any moment you feel like doing it. Another one of our covenant statements is that we affirm and promote the right of conscience and the use of democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. If you travel in the towns of New England, you discover that our congregational and Unitarian congregations were also the site of the town meeting. It was churches who cultivated the right of conscience in their members and the democratic processes within their walls and in the communities where they were located. It was churches that held on to those practices because they understood the deep religious and human roots of the right of conscience and the practice of democracy. Whether we are progressive or conservative, whatever political party we identify with, our common religious task is to heal the wounds of our current democracy for the sake of future generations, for the sake of the earth, for the sake of this mess that we are in, and that is eroding our civil discourse and undermining our civil institutions. Do I need to review out loud why this practice in our covenant is still so much needed in our contemporary world? A world that has seen the rise of the conditions of authoritarianism and where we continue to see the erosion of democracy. Do I need to outline it any further? Now, we can't always live up to these practices that we outline for us, for ourselves in our covenant. We will fail individually, and we often can find encouragement in our congregations to continue. These covenant statements are not just for ourselves alone, but they are ways for us to engage in the wider community in our everyday lives so that we might impact other lives just as Nadia Bowles-Weber's life was impacted by her experience of these practices within the communities that she abided with for 5 summers. The psychologist and theorist of faith development throughout the lifespan, James Fowler, wrote, "Faith is a person's or a group's way of moving into the force field of life." It is our way of finding coherence and giving meaning to the multiple forces and relations that make up our lives. This morning, I pray that we can indeed move into the force field of life with clear, concise, compelling, covenanted commitments to one another that we can align ourselves with in a time which needs them so desperately. I pray that we might be a force to reckon with. So may it be. Amen.
A few years ago, during the stewardship moment, I introduced you to what I called the double clutch challenge. I can tell nobody remembers that. Little reminder. A double clutch, some of you may know what it takes to shift a car before the days of synchromesh transmissions, where you'd have to shift, pause in neutral, and then shift again to the next gear. A way of giving it a second thought, thinking it through to complete the action. Or you may have seen the outfielder on a baseball team field a hit and go to throw to second and then think twice, and no, maybe I should go all the way to home, and they double pump as they're thinking about it. That second thought to complete the action. So this morning, I'm challenging you to double clutch again. But this time, I want you to just take that second moment and reflect upon the significance and the importance of your offering this morning to you as well as to this community. Take a moment and mentally double clutch. For those of us in the sanctuary, there is, as usual, a box at the rear of the sanctuary for you to leave your response offering. There are other ways to give, which will be displayed on the screen. And thank each and every one of you for your generosity, your support to this community. Please join me now in dedicating this morning's offering to the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action. We dedicate our lives, and these are offerings.
It's been a long, dark night, and I've been waiting for the morning. It's been a long, hard fight, but I can see a brand new day dawning. And I've been looking for the sunshine, 'cause I ain't seen it in so long. Everything's gonna work out just fine. Everything's gonna be alright. It's been all wrong, 'cause I can see the light of the clear blue morning. I can see the light of a brand new day. I can see the light of a clear blue morning. Everything's gonna be alright. It's gonna be okay. It's been a long, long time since I've known the taste of freedom and those clinging vines held me down when I don't need 'em. can see the light of a clear blue morning. Everything's gonna be alright. It's gonna be okay. 'Cause I can see, I can see the light of the morning. I can see the light of a brand new day. I can see the light. Everything's gonna be alright. It's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be alright. It's gonna be okay.
As we extinguish our chalice, may our faith lead us from falsehood to truth, from despair to hope, from fear to trust, from hate to love, and from war to peace. Led by our faith, may peace fill our hearts and our world.
So, good morning. Following the benediction, we will sing our closing hymn, which is Faith of the Larger Liberty. The words will appear on the screen. And for some of you, this is just like the first inning, because following our service today, you may know, we have one of our live stream programs entitled American Pep Talk, Depolarizing and Reinvigorating Ourselves and Our Country, with Bruce Fox. Bruce is one of our new members. Would you mind standing, Bruce? Okay. That will take place right here in the sanctuary. There are snacks and refreshments that the live stream at First Unitarian Committee has provided today. You can also pick up our spring brochure and talk to any of them about our programs that are happening this spring. Okay? Make sure, I don't have to say this, but make sure you greet one another. Make sure you say hello to someone who you think is a newcomer, even if they aren't. So our benediction is by John Lewis. I believe that we are all a spark of the divine. And if that spark is nurtured, it can become a burning flame, an eternal force of light. Stand as you are willing and able, and let's sing together our closing hymn.
Praise to be, oh Lord. Faithful for free, whatever Thank you.